Welcome to another episode of Monster Monday from the Ready to Die channel. This series explores the design of a creature I have built for Pathfinder 2nd Edition. The stat block for this creature can be found over on the Monster Monday blog, as well as the Twitter and Discord, all of which are linked below. We're back to building the beasties of Monster Hunter, but this time I'm going for something a little bit lower on the threat level. The so-called venomous commander, the Great Wroggi. Monster Hunter is home to a host of raptor-like creatures, a few of which we've actually built, and a number of others that I have specifically avoided building because I felt that they would be a little redundant. However, the toxic traits of the Great Wroggi, as well as the design aspects of it that I really liked, convinced me to take a crack at it. I have actually faced off against the Great Wroggi, and knew it was on the lower level side of things, but we also discussed about giving it a bit more muscle than the similar creatures that I have made. This led to the Great Wroggi using level 5 in its design, and its Wroggis are level 2, though they are merely an adaptation of the Jagia with some poisonous powers. While labeled as a bird wyvern within Monster Hunter, I went with the animal trait for my miasma-making monster, with it lacking the intellect to make it into a full-on beast. For many of the bird wyverns, I'm inclined to make them a bit more dexterous, and the Great Wroggi is no different in that regard. It kicks off its design with a high dexterity, and its strikes will rely upon this as its primary attack stat, while still using a moderate strength to supplement its damage, letting it pack some power into its punches. Going right down the line, it has a constitution between low and moderate. Given its association with toxins, I didn't want to dip into a low value here. However, it does use that low value for its wisdom, as this is more of a physically aligned creature than a mentally capable one, which is why this is its last positive mental score. This plays a bit into its moderate perception, which uses a value greater than low because the Great Wroggi is a hunter and a predator that needs to find prey, only to then rely on its poisonous potency to put it down. Helping in that effort are its skills, featuring a high acrobatics and athletics. Great Wroggis will sometimes knock around enemies, and the athletics can help to represent that, while its acrobatics is simply largely based on its high dexterity. In regards to the Wroggi's defenses, it has a pretty standard setup, starting with a high armor class, which is largely based on that high dexterity it innately possesses. In addition to this high armor class, the Great Wroggi has a moderate pool of hit points, and immunity to two big damage types, fire and poison. On the other hand, it does have a pretty high weakness to cold damage, all of which is based on its resistances and weaknesses within Monster Hunter normally. For its saving throws, its high dexterity translates into a high reflex save, then a moderate fortitude save, and finally a low will save. All of these saves and values are based on its ability scores, though we did debate about going for a high fortitude given its association with poisons and blights. That leaves us with the Great Wroggi's offenses to look at, and there isn't too much going on here. It has two whole strikes, which both use a high attack bonus and are facilitated by the finesse trait. Its jaws, which only have that finesse trait, deal high damage. Meanwhile, its tail, which adds on the reach and sweep traits, the latter of which is based on its double tail sweep attack, deals moderate damage. On the topic of the tail, this is one of the design aspects I really like about the Great Wroggi. You can kind of see a number of venomous creatures mixed into its design, such as its cobra-like hood, or its tail that has some resemblance to that of a stingray. This hints at its noxious nature, which we're going to start exploring by looking at its abilities. The first thing that we have to talk about with the Wroggi is obviously going to be its Wroggi venom, which forms a cornerstone of several of its other features. I'm still pretty cautious when it comes to poisons, leading to the use of a moderate DC here. Even still, the poison itself is pretty minor, maxing out at 2d6 poison damage with enfeebled 1, and lasting, for, at most, 6 rounds. It mainly just serves to supplement the Great Wroggi's damage a little bit, and make it harder for enemies to fight back against it. Now with its miasma managed, we can look at its breath weapon. This inflicts a bit less than limited use area damage, with the missing portion being assigned to its venom, and it uses a high DC Fortitude save. This is a standard area effect that comes with one unique thing of note. Creatures that fail their save here, that take damage from this cloud of poison, are exposed to the Great Wroggi's venom. However, if the Wroggi's looking for a little bit more of a lingering, a lasting effect, it can use its Toxic Mist to create a cloud that will hang in place for a few rounds. It has the standard effects of an obscuring mist, but it also, as the name suggests, happens to be toxic, which means that creatures that enter or start their turn within it take unlimited use area damage at a moderate DC save. Much like with the breath weapon, failing this save means that they are exposed to the Wroggi's venom once more. Entirely for mechanical reasons, the Great Wroggi can only have a single Toxic Mist active at a time, since it lets it control the battlefield pretty effectively. There's a few things left to cover on the Great Wroggi, and we can flow from Toxic Mist into its Lumbering Bash, an ability inspired by the Great Wroggi's Side Bash. At first glance, there seems to be a lot going on here. It's a single action with a stride, a strike, a push, and the chance to ignore concealment? And I gotta be honest, that is quite a bit. However, I do want to point out that Pounce, a single action, includes a stride and a strike, and has a caveat of keeping creatures hidden. And that is an ability found on a lot of monsters. On top of all this, it doesn't have the Flourish trait, which Lumbering Bash here does. That's all to say, I think this ability is fine, balance-wise, despite having so much packed into it. There's one final piece I've added to my Great Wroggi itself, which is very fittingly named Last Gasp. This is a reaction triggered by reducing the Wroggi to 0 hit points, at which point it releases all of the toxin in its venom sac and exposes the creature downed it to this poison. The concentrated dose means that they take a penalty on the save against the poison, effectively putting it near a high DC rather than a moderate DC. Now, you might be saying that this doesn't really resemble anything the Great Wroggi actually does. But I just like giving monsters some unique reactions to play with every now and then, and this is one of those. It has been a hot minute since I've made some gear for these gruesome ghouls of mine, but I got a fancy little piece put together for the Great Wroggi. I am a mighty big fan of the Wroggi armor, for its design if nothing else, and this belt and holster is inspired by it. Specifically for these skills such as Poison Attack, Ammo Up, and Rapid Fire Up. To represent them, to play into them, this belt is designed to work with firearms and crossbows, giving them a little extra damage when first drawn. It's a great opener, but that does kind of make it a little action intensive to use in the middle of combat. Unless you put to mind to activate its miasma load. This involves some real slick gunplay, holstering and then drawing the weapon again, and changing its usual flat poison damage into persistent poison damage, which leaves the enemy with a miasmic cloud covering their vision. I think it's a fairly fun but minor effect, and it is why I kept it to an hourly usage. I want the people using it to have fun with it. With that all said though, we have made it to the end of yet another video. But before we close things out, I want to talk about something real quick. I started Monster Monday by making monsters in Pathfinder 1st Edition, because it was the system that I was playing at the time, and it was a lot of fun for me. But I don't really play 1st Edition anymore, and so, starting in 2025, I will no longer be making monsters for Pathfinder 1e. That probably doesn't matter much to you folks here on YouTube, but I figured that I should keep everybody informed. Back to the topic on hand, the potent poisons of this perfidious predator puts prey in peril, its powering puffs a pretense to the pummeling it promises. At level 5 with its Wroggies at level 2, this creature can certainly be ran with its usual gang, or could fit in a different sort of encounter. I love the idea particularly of a Wroggi Wrangler. Give it an NPC-style companion or master, inspired by its armor, to lasso and wrap up foes while leaving them easy pickings for its poisons. Please be sure to let me know what you think of this creature, and what other sorts of creatures you'd like to see down in a comment. You can check out other versions of this creature or the other monsters I've made over on the Monster Monday blog, Twitter, or Discord, which are all linked below. Thanks for watching, and have a monstrous Monday.